the Yom Yom for day. My grandfather said, this is written by the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, so his grandfather was the fourth Rebbe of Chabad, Rebbe Shmuel. My grandfather said that Hitbonenut. What's Hitbonenut? Here he says, let's say, profoundly concentrated contemplation on a subject extremely difficult to comprehend. Okay, that's one way of explaining, translating it. Hitbonenut means to try to understand God. Understand how? That's what Hitbonenut is. To try to understand God. What is God? How does God work? What are the commandments? What happens when you do commandments? That's called Hitbonenut. Hitbonenut means to understand. More exactly, it is to answer questions. A question that's really important to you. You have a question, so you mitbonen. How can I, right? How can I get from here to California? Let's see, the lines, maybe I can take a bus. Not a bus. Maybe I can hitchhike. Yeah, maybe a plane. Maybe I can charter a plane. Maybe I can buy a plane. Maybe a train. He's thinking. That's called Hitbonenut. And here we have a deep, important, pressing question on our mind. God is creating me. Why don't I feel it? God is giving the Torah. He gave the Torah. How can that be? You sit and you think. Right? That's called thinking deeply. It's thinking deeply on something which is very deep, very important. So it applies to things which are not dealing to God. But here we're talking about God. But it applies to things not talking about God. Like I just finished saying, my plane got canceled. How am I going to get from here to New York? It's mitbonen. He thinks deeply. Here we're talking about God, though. We're talking about Hasidim. So there's a general principle. If the subject is very important to you, then a person will come to understand it very well. Where do we see this? It says in the Torah, women that don't have any, experience learning Torah, but if it's something important to them, the ingenious arguments that they put forth on their own behalf are discussed by the Tanaim, the Amoraim, the great genius minds of the Torah are discussed by what is important to a child, to a woman. But this woman is very removed intellectually from being able to devise such claims. But the fact is, when something is important to you, is therefore you can touch on such deeply, difficult to understand topics that they arouse the necessity to think deeply into them. Even people of weak intellect will come up with profound concepts. So we see in the Torah that there are questions which are answered, in Chassidut also, questions which a 5-year-old child will answer. Rashi, for instance, in he answers only questions 5-year-old child will answer. And his answers are very deep, very amazing. In Chassidut, we're talking about godliness. But what is the secret to be able to think about God? It says before you pray in the morning, you're supposed to mitbonen. You're supposed to think about God. What are you supposed to think about? It has to be something that's important to you. It has to be something that's important to you. Right? Can it really be that God took us out of Egypt? If so, what does that mean to me now? What is God doing now? Why doesn't he take us out of our problems now? Think about this. You don't have an answer? Look in Chassidut. Maybe the Rebbe's asked these questions. They talk about the 6th chapter of the Tanya, where evil comes from, etc. Think about it deeply. That's called Hitbonenut. Okay.